Bonjour les amis. Bienvenue, bienvenue à Tours. How are you today? Welcome. I am about to get started. I'm just going to wait a couple of seconds for people to arrive. The sun went in hiding. Bad sun, but it's still very nice in the low 70s today. Could you give me a sound check and let me know that it's all good for you before I get started? Just confirm if you can hear me okay. Oui? Merci beaucoup. C'est très gentil. Very nice of you. All good. Great, 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 great. All right. Well, let's see. How about I do this for starters. Bonjour. Let's do this even. Let's live dangerously. Whew. Bonjour les amis. Véronique Véro, for those of you who don't know me yet. I am a French native and a virtual tour guide, content creator, French language instructor. And for the last year, I have been sharing Paris and the rest of La Belle France on social media, and as well as live streaming from wherever I was traveling. I spent most of my adult life in France and in the United States, and very recently, at the beginning of the month, I relocated from Paris to the beautiful city of Tours in the Loire Valley. And today, what I'd like to do is a bit of a follow-up stroll. 2 weeks ago, I took the Friends with Véro Club members on a stroll where we checked out Tours before the big reopening that happened on May 19th. You may know that on May 19th, the French government authorized cafés, restaurants, museums, and all cultural places to reopen. So Tours has a very intense social life and even nightlife. And I thought I would take you today to 3 of the most popular locations where people meet to have a good time. And today is Saturday, so it's perfect. We're going to see the city in action. 2 weeks ago, we saw a very different thing. There were people walking around, but all the restaurants, bars, and cafes were closed. So we are going to start in the neighborhood where I live currently for the next 2 months until I move into the condo that I purchased, which I will be working on and renovating, and then I'll be moving again in July, but I will still be here in Tours. So if you are ready, I will switch the camera around, put my face mask back on. And you know, I like this to start here actually, because, oh yeah, bonjour in Hawaii. Boy, that's a long way from here, isn't it? It's 6 p.m. here. You see this mûrier, this very young mûrier. It's a mulberry tree, I believe, in English. This is very important if you are involved in the silk trade, and there is a connection to the city of Tours. So I'll mention that later on this stroll, but I like that on this tiny little square, there is in fact a mûrier, a mulberry tree with those beautiful half-timbered homes in the background. So we are going to stroll first in the first section, which is La Rue Colbert, C-O-L-B-E-R-T. This is the oldest street in town, and it is lined with restaurants on both sides. 2 weeks ago, everything was closed. Today, it's a little different. Some restaurants have reopened, a lot of them have, but some of them have remained closed because they didn't have a terrace, and they're waiting for June 9th because it is the next step. Basically, on June 9th, restaurants will be allowed to welcome people indoors as well. But keep in mind there are a lot of restrictions. They cannot have work at full capacity. The terraces are only open at 50% of their capacity. It's only 6 p.m. now, but if we come back here in an hour, these tables will be completely full. They were last night when the sun was shining. And they also have to space out the tables, so most restaurants can really only use 50% of their usual space. So for that reason, a lot of restaurants have decided, not just in Tours, but also in Paris, to stay closed until June 9th, when they can also reopen indoors. There are limits as well as to the number of people you can have by table. So if you come to Europe this summer, to France, and with a large party, keep in mind it's a maximum of 6 people per table. 6 people per party. That's another limitation. So this is the oldest street in town, and kings have gone down the street over the centuries. It's pretty long, and it's in the heart of the original historic heart of Tours, when the Romans settled down here in the 1st century AD. Tours has 2 historic hearts, and my club members who've been on several strolls with me in this beautiful city over the last few months have already heard the story. I guess they're about to hear it again today. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining me from wherever you are in the world. Remember to subscribe to this great YouTube channel where hours and hours of virtual travel await, and to like the video too, because this tells YouTube that you enjoy what I create, and then they tend to share it more with other viewers. The numbers are still going down, to answer your question, since they have reopened. And so it's good news, but everything, of course, is being monitored very closely by the French government. La Réserve is a very popular place on this street. It's a wine bar. So you have a lot of ethnic eateries, even grocery stores, in fact. And we have semi-gastronomic restaurants. We have here a Lebanese restaurant. I think I showed last time. Bonjour, bonjour. If you're interested in the history of Tours, I did a really fun tour of the city right before Christmas, showing all the lights on the buildings in December. And you will find it on the YouTube channel as well. So don't miss it if you want to hear more about the background, basically, of Tours. So we are strolling around my street for the next 2 months, which is La Rue Colbert. Fortunately, my bedroom overlooks a very quiet courtyard, and so I don't hear all this, except during the day when it's actually pretty nice. On the right-hand side is the Pale, a very popular pub. Anybody who's come to Tours has pretty much had a glass of something here. So this entire section of the street is pedestrian only, which is nice. And then if you keep going over there, at some point, you'll start seeing some cars. I love this grocery store. You know how now in French cities you see a lot of those express Carrefour, which are basically smaller versions of those big French supermarkets or hypermarkets that are in the suburbs. Well, this one is a little special because I found out after I moved in that it actually has one of the best butchers or deli traiteur in town. So I do get some nice food here several times a week. We are here in a section of La Rue Colbert I really like. It is a beautiful little square that's been here since the Middle Ages, so one of the oldest squares in town. It's called La Place Foire le Roi. The square, Foire for fair, and Le Roi, which is the king. Why? Because a long time ago, a French king who was trying to raise money to build a wall to protect his city at the start of the 100 Years' War decided to have fairs here, so everything that was sold at the fair would be taxed. And this is why this square has been named La Place Foire le Roi. And I will show you the street plaque because I know some of you enjoy following that. There you go. Another thing that happened on this square is were executions and torture in the Middle Ages. Fun times. In the 16th century, a French king named Francis I, François Ier, who did a lot for this region. You probably visited the beautiful Chateau of Chambord and all the chateaux he worked on or commissioned. He set up Tours with a lot of fountains. He was trying to modernize the city. So this fountain you see here has been here since the 16th century, which is quite amazing if you think about it. So, last time we continued along the Rue Colbert. Bonjour, monsieur. And this time I'm going to actually change the route so my club members don't get bored because they've already seen the other half of the street. So I am going to take you on a different route, but don't worry, you won't miss out. There's a lot to see too. It's nice to change routes once in a while. So our goal today, our mission, is to document the after the reopening of France, of French terraces, bars and restaurants. 2 weeks ago we did the before, today we're doing the after. See this Italian restaurant? In about an hour, restaurants start serving around 7 p.m. So in about an hour this terrace will be full. Piece of advice for you if you're coming this summer, since Europe looks like it might be reopening to a lot of international travelers. Gentleman just waved at me, that's nice. Keep in mind that reservations are always a good idea in terrace at restaurants. Since restaurants can only serve with limited capacity, a lot of places are booked solid for lunch and for dinner. People do make reservations, so don't hesitate to do that if there's a place you really want to try, even more than before. So we are leaving this beautiful Place Foire-le-Roi, which is lined with gorgeous, gorgeous buildings. Tours tells the story of French architecture pretty much. There are houses in Tours that date back to the 12th century, ranging all the way to the 19th century and later. So if you're interested in architecture, this is a great city to visit. You see how as soon as you step away, so Rue Colbert is really loud and it will get louder in an hour and 2 hours. But as soon as you step away from it, it's really quiet. And I like that here. There isn't that much car traffic. There aren't as many mopeds as I got to put up with in Paris, and I do enjoy that. We have some interesting houses coming up. And look at this beautiful entrance here. So you have the Middle Ages on this side. These houses are from the late 15th, early 16th century. And on this side, 18th century. So you have everything along the same street. Bonjour, if you just joined us, this is Véronique, Véro, your best French friend in France. And I am taking you on a fun stroll in my new city of Tours, in the beautiful Loire Valley. And in case you're wondering, Tours is a medium-sized city of about 135,000 people downtown, almost 500,000 in the metropolitan area, and with a very important student population, about 40,000 students, so it's quite lively. A lot of restaurants and businesses offer discounts to students. This house here is amazing because the facade is made of slate. You see the steep rooftops? They did that so the rain would just slide down, and then the facade protects it as well. But as it turns out, the slate is also a status symbol because not everybody could afford to have a house entirely covered in slate. Look at this. How do you like that? So we've seen La Rue Colbert, which was our first spot, and we only saw a section of it. And it's not at its liveliest because it's still early. We're going to see 2 more spots where locals, we call them les Turrongjo, and the women are les Turrongelles, come and party and enjoy life en terrace. We are headed to spot number 2. There is a very big university in Tours indeed, campuses all over the city actually that belong to it. We will be close to one of them, so 40,000 students, that's quite an important population, and a lot of them come from other countries as well, because Tours has the reputation of having the French spoken in Tours for a long time has had the reputation of being the purest form of French with no accent. So the city traditionally has attracted a lot of foreign students who wanted to learn French. We have excellent language schools here as well. Look at these houses. Imagine they've been standing since the late 15th century, early 16th at the latest. So typically what you would do is there would be shops. Now we have garages down here, but you would have shops downstairs, and then people would live on the next 2 floors, 1, 2, and then the top floor at that time was an attic, like a storage area. Of course, right now they're probably trying to make the most of all the space. Isn't that beautiful? we are headed towards the Loire River. Tours is lucky to have two rivers. Downtown Tours is actually located between the Loire on the north side and the Cher River, C-H-E-R, on the south side. So from where I live now and from where I will live later, I can access the Loire very quickly in less than 5 minutes, which is great. Wind's picked up a little. I hope you can't hear it too much. This is a very busy road named after André Malraux, the famous Minister of Cultural Affairs of General de Gaulle in the 1960s. It's a very busy road. You got to be careful when you cross. People are pretty cool though. Here we go. This is really pretty. There are several ways to walk along the Loire. You can do it above the river like here, or you can do it very close to the water. I will show the river to you in a second. But first, let's take a peek here. The library, bonjour monsieur. The library is in front of us. This is the second library Tours had. This is a city that suffered a lot during World War II. We will talk about it later. And this library was built in the 1950s. At the time, it was considered a very modern building, though it was controversial, like many of the buildings they erected after World War II. But what I want you to show you here is this fountain and this monument. We are right here in this garden by this fountain on American soil. I bet you did not know that. I found out myself a couple months ago when I was visiting the city. All of this here is American soil. And the reason is, this is dedicated to the soldiers, American forces, who helped France Tours and the region of Tours during World War I. You see there's a message in French. It's dedicated to the SOS, Services of Supply, the expeditionary American forces that were here in 1917 and 1918. The US government eventually bought this piece of property from the city of Tours. There was an old building here they took down, and they erected this beautiful fountain as a tribute to all their soldiers. In fact, there is a message here in English too. Erected by the United States of America in grateful recognition of the achievements of the services of supply, SOS. So there's a lot to say about this fountain. I won't do that today. This is not our objective today, but I want you to spot this. This is quite beautiful. It was recently renovated or restored, which is why it's so beautiful. So voila, we took a few steps on American soil. And there are several places in Tours that commemorate the friendship between Tours and the Touraine, the old name of this region, with the United States. As I said, we're headed towards the Loire. Oh yeah, you can borrow books from the library, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure you can. Here is the beautiful Loire River, the longest in France, one of the wildest too, and probably one of the most treacherous ones. Wish the sun was shining like it did yesterday, but it's not the first live stream or the first virtual tour where the sun is hiding on us. We've had that a lot this winter. Eh ouais, c'est le reportage. Merci monsieur, au revoir. He says, is this a documentary? Very nice. Look at the Pont Wilson, the Wilson Bridge. Oh, and our beautiful tram going by. State-of-the-art tram. Look at that. Now, one thing I did fall in love with in this city 6 months ago when I started coming here to check it out when I was house hunting, even in the heart of winter, was the fact that as soon as you step down, see the city is right above here, but as soon as you step down by the river and you start strolling by the river, either along the shore here, the riverbanks, or on one of the islands in the middle of the river, you totally forget you're in a city. And I don't know any other city in France, or larger city, that does that. Usually the riverbanks are quite civilized, but you can't forget you're in a city. In Tours, it's very different. There is a beach. You can just be down there and forget you're in a city, which I think is great. Ah, merci. Too tight for both of us. Merci, monsieur. So, another favorite spot to party and hang out. People are super friendly, you're correct. They're more than chatty, they're just very friendly in stores, on the streets. I tell my little story everywhere. I just arrived in town, I'm new here. People just tell you, come back here, we'll take care of you. You know, they're just super friendly, which is nice. So second spot that locals enjoy for partying, and what time is it now? 6:20, so it's still pretty early, but you'll see some crowds. So remember, face masks are mandatory at all times in France if you come this summer, with the exception of when you're sitting down, eating, drinking, or when you're smoking. The rest of the time, if you walk around in public places, you are supposed to wear a face mask. Like that group over there is sitting, they're not wearing them because they're having a picnic, so that's allowed. But if you see people walking around without a face mask, like this gentleman over there, you're not supposed to do that. Most people, from what I've seen, are pretty good. Here is one of the party places that hasn't reopened. I showed it to my club members 2 weeks ago, and it hasn't reopened yet. Beautiful roses, though. Ooh. So these are like what we call buvettes, B-U-V-E-T-T-E-S. Buvette is like a place where you drink, where you stand up, it's informal. And around here we have also what is known as a guinguette. Guinguette. You've heard me say this name, or this word, when we were in Paris, in those former villages outside Paris. I talked to you about how working classes used to meet in the 18th century, 19th century, in all these restaurants, sometimes by the water, but not always, when they could on Sunday have a good time, kick back, drink, eat, and dance. Well, Tours and other cities along the Loire are famous for their guinguettes. Here is the Pont Wilson, the Bridge Wilson. Of course, it wasn't called that at the beginning. It was called that after World War I as a tribute to Woodrow Wilson, the American president. But originally, when it was built in the 18th century, it was called Le Pont Neuf, the new bridge. But locals call it Le Pont de Pierre, the stone bridge. It's been through a lot, let's just put it this way, between war, fires. But there's also always been a bridge here, even since Gallo-Roman times. There were wooden bridges in the Middle Ages, and eventually some of them stuck, like this one. Ah, mais je vous ai pas pris en photo. Désolé, hein. Allez, dites bonjour, on est en live avec les États-Unis. Bonne soirée. Yeah, they're getting a little tipsy. They're not quite drunk yet. It's going to get there. Okay. Look at the current. Do you see? The Loire is a mad, mad river. Lots of sandbars, very treacherous. You want to be careful here. We're going under the bridge, heading towards that place where the music is. The music is just from these groups of young people on the right-hand side, but I'm headed to a place that's on the left over there. Look at the current on the river. That's nuts. You see that boat over there? It's always there. It's a flat bottom boat because sometimes the Loire gets really shallow in the summer, and it's called une gabarre. G-A-B-A-R-R-E. You see them a lot around the Loire. Now, I found my favorite spot in town by the river, and it's on the other side of that big island, the island named Aucard, A-U-C-A-R-D. There's a guinguette over there where that's going to become my HQ, I think. I might take my club members there when the nice weather returns, either next weekend or the weekend after, because that is a fabulous place. Places to drink, places to eat. There's a stage for concerts. And they tell me it's a lot smaller than it was before COVID, and I'm sure it'll return to its old self eventually. But ever since it opened last week, people have been coming here. And there'll be more of them later. So the place I'm referring to is right here. That's the guinguette. And in order to see it well, I'll have to stand on those stairs over there to show you. And there's a big line to get in. I went to check it out yesterday. If you walk around it over there, there's a line because they have, of course, to observe social distancing, limit the number of people per table. Masks are mandatory if you're moving around. So this is the guinguette, the famous guinguette in Tours, and you will see it better in a second. I'm not tall enough to show it to you from here, so I shall cheat with these. Let's see, how are we doing? Not bad, look at that. Voila, la guinguette. You can see they have set up a restaurant here. You can see it's getting full. People having drinks. In the back where that canopy is a stage for music. And I think there is a concert tonight. So this is the famous guinguette where everybody comes between May, I think, and October every year. And it just reopened a week ago. Kids have their own little section right here. They even have tables for the parents who can have a drink while watching their kiddos, which is nice. So it's getting lively. Let's see, it's 6:30 p.m. on a Saturday. It's going to get busier. When I walked by around 8:30 last night, it was really hopping. And I think the same will happen. But you see how the French don't eat early, so 6:30, nobody's dining. It's just people who are having an apéro. Welcome if you just joined us. We're walking around Tours in the beautiful Loire Valley, my new city. And I'm showing you the places where locals come for l'apéro and where they come to party in general. By the way, now is a good time to talk about l'apéro, because I know the word apéro, apéritif, does confuse some people. So let's do this. L'apéro is in fact several things. It's a moment of the day. It can happen before lunch or before dinner. It's a break you take before enjoying a good meal, always with friends, with a nice drink, some munchies. You don't want to, ruin your appetite. So it's a moment of the day. It's also an alcoholic beverage, because when you say I want an apéro, it means I want an alcoholic beverage, though you can have juice if you want. And number 3, most importantly, it is a beloved French ritual. I know it exists in other countries. I know people have drinks before dinner in other countries, but I think in French life, it's really important. And more, people don't like to cook, especially in places like Paris. They don't have space in their apartments to cook. So more and more, the apéro is not just before dinner, it's turned into the whole evening. So instead of having little munches like peanuts and cherry tomatoes and a drink and conversation, you're going to turn it into an apéro dînatoire. So dînatoire from dîner to dine. And then it's going to go on and on and on all night. And it will be an event in itself. So I'm thinking, if I switch back, I'm thinking the people you see here on the right are probably going to do this. I'm not sure they'll actually go eat there when it opens. I think they'll just stay there and order drinks and munchies all evening probably. And then you can have your apéro as a picnic, of course, which a lot of these groups here are doing I can see them with bottles. You see the young ladies there have brought a blanket right by the Loire. How bad can it be? And people bring their own drinks and food and munchies. So the apéro is really, you can have it anywhere. And the French love it. And I think to a lot of visitors, it's also come to symbolize French life. When they're on vacation and they finally slow down and they enjoy having an apéro, sometimes with French friends or French people when they know them. Okay, so this was our spot number 2, which will get livelier, I guarantee you. The library we saw earlier, we came from that direction, is over there. I see some people saying since the pandemic, the apéro has become a nightly ritual. Yes, I know. It's hard to resist the call of the apéro when you've spent, like we did last spring, 23 hours inside a small apartment and can only go out 1 hour a day. I still remember that. I don't think I'll ever forget. Not an excuse, mind you, just an explanation. All right, so Tours, historic city that was several times the capital of France, including in the late Middle Ages, for almost 100 years, in fact, until a French king named Francis I, François Ier, decided that Paris was going to be it and started working actively on fixing up all medieval fortresses in Paris like the Louvre to turn them into royal residences. But until then, and for a while, on and off, Tours was a royal city. And through its history, it's been the fallback plan for kings and French governments. Every time there's a crisis, they seem to fall back on Tours as their safe place. I'm showing you those 2 buildings, which are not particularly attractive. In fact, they're pretty controversial. They stand where other historic buildings used to be. They're going to be a very high-end hotel, high-end condos, and they're not quite finished, I believe. But this is Tours for you. It's a blend of history, tradition, and at the same time, it's a very dynamic city that looks towards the future. This is what this place is going to look like. There's a nice representation of it. You see the old walls of Saint-Julien Church. I'll show it to you in a second. And look at the new things. So Tours, as you can see here, is definitely looking towards the future. Doesn't really dwell on its past. At the same time, it hasn't forgotten the past. And I will show you how in a second. Here is our beautiful tram. I am in love with this tramway, though it really only has 1 line currently, but it's a long one and it's convenient. Look how sleek it is. And for those of you who haven't heard the story yet, you see those columns, those striped columns on the side, black and white. These are the signature style of a famous artist named Daniel Buren. And you may have heard his name when you go to the Palais Royal in Paris and you look at the Buren columns in Paris. He's the one who designed this beautiful tram. I've ridden it a few times, it's quite efficient. And if you look at the fares, a standard fare is going to cost you $160, but there are a lot of discounts offered. You have a pass that you can load up. And you can do 1 trip, 2 trips, 10 trips. That's the one I got. You have a day trip, 2-day trip, or 2-day pass, family. And then you have tons of discounts for young kids, for young people, for students, for seniors, for people who have limited means, different levels. And these people pay ridiculous amounts each month to be able to ride the tram. I mean, these are monthly fares. So it's pretty generous, basically. And it takes you from north to south. It goes really far through the city and in and out too. Thank you for joining me today. I know it's a busy weekend and a holiday weekend in several parts of the world, so I'm very grateful that you're here with me. Now, I told you earlier that Tours suffered a lot in its history. Tours, during World War II, actually became one of those martyred cities that France has. We talk about the ones in Normandy a lot, but Tours suffered tremendously during World War II. In fact, you're looking now at the most famous, probably, street in town, La Rue Nationale, the National Road. When it was built in the 18th century, it was the first street that Tours had that crossed the city from north to south across the Loire River. It brought a lot of prosperity to Tours because any merchandise that came from the north was taxed before entering the city. The goal was to connect Paris in this direction to Spain in the other direction, and this was done, like I said, in the 18th century. It was the Royal Road, the Imperial Road, the Royal Road, and eventually became the National Road. Well, in June 1940, during the fall of France, French troops retreated back to Tours with the French government, convinced the Germans would not cross the Loire, which is right here. So in order to make sure of that, they blew up part of the bridge we just looked at, Pont Wilson. The problem is when they blew it up, they also blew up their water cables, you know, the cables that were bringing, pipes that were bringing water. Bonjour! Bonjour, mademoiselle. And the Germans arrived on the other side and started bombing the city with incendiary bombs. And people here just watched their city burn, 70% in fact. This whole section here burned down for several days, and they couldn't do anything. There was no more water. And the Germans' intention was to completely destroy, just erase the city. So local authorities eventually negotiated and let the Germans cross. And then, to add insult to injury, they had to put up with 4 years of occupation. It wasn't over yet. In 1944, a few months before D-Day, the city suffered a lot again from Allied bombings. So they have known some really, really tough years. And all of these buildings, which look like nothing much, are called the Reconstruction Buildings. And they are an entire slice of the city that was rebuilt rather hastily in 10 years after the war to house the local population. So it wasn't rebuilt and turned into the beautiful buildings it was before. Cities like Rouen in Normandy have done that, or Saint-Malo. No, Tours just kept this, and they knew it wasn't pretty, it was quite controversial, but every day you walk here and you remember what happened here. This beautiful church is called Saint-Julien. There's been a religious site here since the 6th century. Churches were built, torn down, rebuilt. Miraculously, this is the only historic landmark that was not destroyed either by the German bombs or by the Allied bombings. It would have been a huge loss. Next to it are some very interesting buildings, an amazing cloister, and inside a great museum I'm planning to check out dedicated to Les Compagnons du Devoir, this very old organization of craftsmen, dates back to the Middle Ages. They're the ones helping repair Notre Dame today. Okay, so this was it for the history talk. I just wanted you to understand what the city has been through and why sometimes as you walk through Tours, you see half-timbered homes, you see beautiful 18th century neoclassical facades, and then you see this. That's because Tours has not erased the traces of what happened here. They did not have time. They just wanted to house people, to give, people were in the streets. It was really hard at the end of the war. Yes, you're right. Tours is pretty clean. I have noticed that too. So, just so you orient yourselves, the Loire and the north and Paris are behind me. On the left here is La Rue Colbert, the street where we started. If I had kept walking, we would have ended up here. And on the right-hand side is the second historic heart of the city, and that is where we're headed now, but I'm going to follow a different route so my club members don't see the same streets twice. La Rue Nationale is always busy, even during the lockdowns, even in the winter. On Saturdays, there were people here walking up and down. Why? Because there are a lot of shops. It's not my favorite street for shopping, lots of chains, but it is always lively. And if you follow it to the south, it takes you to a beautiful square with beautiful brasseries and one of the most magnificent Hôtel de Ville, City Hall, I've seen in France. It's a very pleasant street because it's pedestrian only. It's only for pedestrians, the tram and bicycles, that's it. But for shopping, I'd go somewhere else. So we're just going to follow it for a few minutes and then I'll turn right and we will head into the second historic heart of town where we will wrap up this walk. I don't know what's going on over there. There's music. So you see the Rue Nationale. Picture it once lined with beautiful 18th century building dating back to the time it was built. All of that destroyed during the war. But the cool thing is if you follow it for one more block, that's the end of the fire. That's where it stops. And then it's all 18th century buildings again. So I will take you there on another stroll. The second half of the street is beautiful. But this is what war did and the reconstruction that followed. Anybody wants to dance? Join them? It's actually a catchy tune. Wait, I have over 130 people here and only 51 likes. Come on, friends. You need to help me out here. Give me some likes. Tell YouTube you're enjoying this, please. Well, if you are, of course. Here's a big brasserie. All right, let's head right. Let's leave La Rue Nationale. It's shopping and it's music to head back to the old town. Yeah, I think you're right. It was a Hare Krishna group. Here we are in La Rue des Halles, Les Halles, the covered food market. We have a great covered food market here. Now, I told you the Gallo-Romans, the Romans arrived here in the 1st century AD, built a very powerful city here. But we also had a very important gentleman in town who was once the Bishop of Tours. His name was Martin, and he became known as Saint Martin de Tours. This is the very short version of the history talk. Following his death at the end of the 4th century, he became such a legend around Christendom that Tours became a very important pilgrimage site. In fact, over time, they brought his body back here in this neighborhood and built a massive basilica. It was one of the biggest in Europe. And this neighborhood was called Martinopole. It was the hunter, and they called this part of the city, Chateauneuf. At some point in time, you had the two hearts of the city beating, the one where I live back there, surrounded by a wall to push off barbarians, and then you had another wall here protecting this corner of the city. And then by the time the 100 Years' War starts in the mid-14th century, they build a big wall protecting both sides of the city. And that's when it started growing really fast. I like La Rue des Halles for shopping because those are much nicer stores than the ones you see on the Rue Nationale. Also, they're not all chains, so we have a lot of independent stores, and a lot of them feel like they've been here a really long time, which I like. When you walk here, you know you're not in Paris. I don't know how to explain it. To me, it feels like La Provence. But again, look at these buildings. You know you're in a section that totally burned down in 1940, during World War II, at the beginning of World War II. Now, I hear a lot of these buildings have been redone inside and are quite nice, but from the outside, of course, they don't look that great. Oh, hey Sharon, don't apologize. There's always the replay. I know it's a busy weekend for many people. Oh look, we have here une terrasse éphémère. You know those temporary terraces that Parisians have done a lot with a special permission from the city of Paris where they can actually spread out onto the street? Well, you see that in Tours, but not as often, I must say. Right, we're waiting for the little green man so we don't get run over. I am crossing la Rue Marceau over there, M-A-R-C-E-A-U. And we are walking around the Rue des Halles. And if I follow it all the way to the end, which I won't today, I would reach the covered food market and the lovely market, outdoor market we have twice a week, where I was this morning. It's a great one. Very nice produce. Of course, you know that this region, the Touraine or the Val de Loire, on top of being a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and that includes Tours, has great climate, so everything grows here. Traditionally, for centuries, there have been orchards and fields, beautiful produce on the markets. So, now we are heading into my favorite section of this area, Chateauneuf. It's a very walkable city, very flat, and the train station is actually about 10-15 minutes from here. You can ride the tram to the train station as well. And Tours is only an hour and 10 minutes from Paris with a high-speed train. Gare Montparnasse, very convenient. The only drawback is that it's expensive. It's expensive because you ride the TGV. So for a ride that lasts less than an hour and a half, you can end up paying more than 60 euros round trip. Look at this street. Oh, perfect, he's turning. Not bad, eh? All right, so here we are on the street, la Rue des Halles. We see three big buildings here. This one, the Basilica, the new Basilica built in the 19th century, where Saint Martin is buried. Highly recommend you visit the crypt if you come here. And then we have two more towers. It's an incredible area. The one on the right is called La Tour Charlemagne, the Charlemagne Tower. The one on the left over there is the Clock Tower. These two towers were two of 5 towers in the Basilica that emerged through the Middle Ages. That was one of the largest in Europe, I've mentioned, when it was a pilgrimage site. So if we're standing in the middle of the street, we would have been inside the Basilica. It was massive. 5 naves, 7 chapels, 5 towers. The only 2 are left are these 2. Imagine. The street itself was created in the late 19th century. I am going to turn now on La Place du Chateauneuf. Remember, I told you the second historic heart of Tours around Saint Martin here was called Chateauneuf. Here is one of the prettiest squares in Tours. It's also a very popular place for an apéro or a café because you have them lined up against these beautiful buildings there. These are olive trees in the middle. And we are about to enter a very lively place. Because now, of course, it's almost 7 p.m. here, so people are out and about enjoying their Saturday evening, you can see. It really is one of the most beautiful squares here. It's very elegant. And then on the top of the Basilica, you can see here the basilica from the 19th century. The statue over there is actually Saint Martin looking towards the southern section of Tours. And some relics are inside the statue. They found them when they renovated it several years ago. Oh, thanks. Thanks for the kind comments. Now, one of my personal goals is, as soon as possible, to go up this tower when it reopens. I understand there is a terrace up there at the top that overlooks the city of Tours and the whole region, and apparently it's breathtaking. So its name again, Charlemagne, which was the Holy Roman Emperor. And it's had more misadventures in its history than most buildings do probably. It collapsed in the 30s, it was rebuilt in the 60s, it suffered during the revolution. But remember, this was actually part of 5 towers in that giant basilica. It was, I believe, in the north transept. Les terrasses. So when we were here 2 weeks ago with club members, it was pretty quiet because the terraces were closed. The restaurants were only doing takeout for some of them. I tell you, people are pretty friendly here. And this is the other tower left from the basilica. And we are going to follow an extremely lively street called la Rue du Chateauneuf. We were on la Place du Chateauneuf, and you are going to see les Turrongjo and les Tourangelles enjoying their terrace. Now, right now, to get a table on a Saturday evening, it's in the low 70s, the weather is pleasant. To get a table, if you haven't made a reservation at a popular place, is probably close to impossible. Remember, we still have a curfew. It was 7 p.m. It switched to 9 p.m. last week, and on June 9th, when restaurants can reopen indoors, it will switch to 11 p.m. So chances are, if you come before the end of June, you will not be able to stay outside after 11 p.m. Look at that. Now, if you look at the tables, they're kind of respecting the rules because I don't see any group that has more than 6 people. And some tables are somewhat spread out, not as packed or piled as I've seen in other cities that shall remain nameless. And keep in mind, we have a lot of students here. So the area we're headed to has a lot of bars. La Cour des Grands. Le strapontin, that's the name of that little fold-out seat you have in the old-fashioned movie theaters or theaters. On the side, they had this little fold-out seat that you could use that wasn't very comfortable. Here's this great brocante or vintage shop that I've shown you in photos before, Au Bonheur des Dames, named after a famous department store mentioned in one of Émile Zola's books. Lots of fun little things. I looked at it earlier. They did have some fun little things. I don't think you'd find anything of real value, but maybe it would have value to you. Here we have le bar, le Turrongjo. And we reach another square. Tours has many squares, and we reach another square, la Place du Grand Marché, the square of the big market, where you guessed it, there used to be a huge market back in the Middle Ages. Today it's a square lined with restaurants. That nondescript building is the covered food market, Les Halles. So if we'd followed the street, we would have reached it here. And here on the square, we have some pretty amazing architecture. We're going to see some half-timbered homes from the 15th and 16th centuries. We're going to see facades from the 18th century. And in the side streets as well, just beautiful. I think I'll come back here for a special tour because there's a lot to say around this square, actually. So this square, called the Square of the Big Market, I'm glad you're enjoying the contrast. It was very different 2 weeks ago, wasn't it? Especially since it was about to rain. Oops, sorry. This boulangerie is an award-winning one. I bought bread and pastries from them. It's one of the best in the city, in fact. And the square has changed name recently, or in the last 15 years, when this guy arrived, the Monster. A contemporary French artist built this to the city, brought this to the city about 15, 17 years ago. The Monster, le Monstre. And so locals affectionately call the square La Place du Monstre, the Monster Square. He's quite friendly looking, you get used to him. Xavier Veillant is the name of the artist, V-E-I-L-H-A-N, if you want to look him up. He's a Parisian, I think he's based in Lyon, and he does a lot. He's a photographer, a sculptor, a painter, and he does a lot of temporary exhibits around French cities and around the world as well. So this, again, what time is it now? 7. So in about 5, 10, 15 minutes, people will start sitting down here. This is France. Dinner service doesn't start until at least 7, sometimes 7:30. But with the curfew at 9 p.m., they kind of have to start at around that time, so people have time to eat. I'm sure this will change when the curfew gets pushed off to 11. Lots of burger joints, I've got to say, in Tours, probably because of the students. Tons of burger joints everywhere. I still have to try a lot of the local landmarks. I've heard really great things about that restaurant over there, Le Zinc, the Zinc. Look at these houses. Look at that. So here and in the side streets, you see a lot of those beautiful homes, not necessarily medieval homes like these, but also, like I said, 17th, 18th century homes and former hôtels particuliers or private mansions that belong to the affluent classes. Bonjour, vous allez bien? Bon appétit. Bonne soirée. I think they all want to be on camera, that's cool. I prefer this to the alternative when people don't want you filming them and get really mad. Look at the mix of facades here. So my new place, the condo that I bought, is about 5 minutes in this direction. So I'll be at the back of the loud neighborhood, but I'll be 5 minutes walk from the market, the covered food market, and all the fun area we're about to discover now, which will be the last section of this stroll. I'm running a little long, not the first time. This is a very old street, la Rue De La Rotisserie. La Rotisserie, how perfect. And traditionally, since the Middle Ages, it's been lined with restaurants, lots of restaurants. And you may recognize Balzac Burger. I reviewed this great place on social media yesterday. Best burgers in Tours, really high-end stuff. Vous allez bien? So Balzac Burger is here. They're really nice people. So if you come to Tours and you want to eat burgers, don't hesitate. The young lady here is a friendly manager. Ça va? That was Azim, the owner. He also owns another restaurant, and look at this. So La Rue De La Rotisserie, which is super old, is really interesting because on the left-hand side over there, you have the medieval facade, the half-timbered homes, and on the right, you have all the buildings that were added in the 18th century in a totally different style. Here you have a bouchon. Usually you hear that word in Lyon. Bistro-like restaurants, le bouchon Turrongjo. And look at this. See those houses with the staircases that were kind of wrapped up and stand on the outside of the building? That's very typical of the architecture around here. No, not all these people are vaccinated. That's another thing I was going to add. If crowds make you nervous, do not come to Europe this summer because France's population won't be vaccinated in large numbers for many months. And people do go out on terrace and they'll be wearing masks when they have to, but no, not all of them will be vaccinated. So I'm giving you a fair warning. If crowds make you uncomfortable, this summer may not be the best time to come. You are walking in a medieval neighborhood. I'm glad you're going to go to Balzac Burgers. They're nice people, and boy, I mean, they're really good. Like, the products are so good. Here is la Rue du Change. Change as in exchange, exchanging money. Why? Because the pilgrims who came here through the Middle Ages to worship Saint Martin, Saint Martin de Tours, and also go on their way to Santiago de Compostela, would trade their currencies from wherever they were coming to the local currency, which was called la livre Turrongjo, the Tour pound. And I have a little bit of trivia for you. The currency in Tours, la livre Turrongjo, eventually became the French franc. So under Louis XIV, in the 17th century, it became the national currency. Another thing that Tours gave to France. Oh, loud. All right, so this is the part where those of you who don't like crowds are going to feel mildly uncomfortable. But this is the most popular place in town, the famous Place Plumereau, or Place Plume. I only saw it empty for months and months, and I had been promised it would be lively when it reopened, and they did not lie. To get a table at one of these restaurants, even when they were empty at noon when I stopped by, I couldn't get one because they had reservations. They were sold out. So the reason this square is very Vous voulez être dedans? Bonjour. Vous attendez votre table?
Non,
Ah d'accord, c'était bon? Bon, eh ben bonne soirée. They just had a nice meal. They wanted to be in the vlog, she said. So they were. Look at these houses. Late 15th, early 16th century. This place looked nothing like this in the 60s when it was literally rescued by some tour officials who asked for the help of the national government. Charles de Gaulle was president at the time, and without the help of the national government, they would not have been able to do that. It would have looked really different then. I'll come back here during the day and do a tour when it's quieter. There are a lot of good stories to tell. I came here for coffee this morning and it was a lot more peaceful. My favorite building here is this one from the mid-19th century. Isn't this gorgeous? All right, I'm going to wrap up now because I've taken up too much of your time already. I just wanted to show you that indeed France and Tours have reopened. So far, so good, though I'm sure the government is monitoring results very carefully. Look at this. What a setting for lunch or for coffee. So it's the end of the month, so I'm not going to encourage you to join the club today or tomorrow because you get more rewards if you join at the beginning of the month, which would be next week. But let me just tell you that if you join the Friends with Véro Club, you will see a lot more of tour and what I see on my travels. My club members have been on several strolls in this fabulous city already, and they will continue to do that. So look it up on Patreon, patreon.com/FrenchGirl in Seattle. And consider signing up next week if you don't want to miss out. And if not, I am a tour guide and I have a virtual tip jar on PayPal. And this will be mentioned in the notes, in this video notes, as soon as I come off the air. And tips are gratefully appreciated, of course. I'll just say a quick little goodbye with my mask on. Too many people. Thank you for joining me today, friends. Sorry I ran a little long, but there was so much to show. So much to show, and we will be doing more tours here. And I'll head back to Paris as well in June for more reporting from Paris. Happy Memorial Day weekend. Happy holiday weekend, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining me in Tours, where the party is hopping. À bientôt!